Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Sonic Adventure 2 How to Create a Custom Level tutorial series. And today I'm going to go over how I created that example level found in the main tutorial video. Also included in this video, I'll be showing you some advanced tricks on how to make ramps, how to include curves, and do more. So to start, we're going to start playing around with our level. Now, remembering certain things to this tutorial, one of the first things we want to do is expand our render distance. 1000 is going to go very short, very fast, so I'm just going to set that to 100,000. And what I'm going to do to start is I'm going to start adding in some objects. Now, the first thing I do is I always add in a plane, because a plane, it's kind of like your ground, you know. It's a very good object to use for ground. Again, if you're planning on making your level float in some sort of void, maybe a cube might be better. But for right now, I'm just keeping things simple. Cube versus plane, that's up to you, but plane tends to be the simpler of the two. So now once I have it, I want to scale it up because, normally I think it's pretty small. Now, of course, you could go crazy trying to press S all the time and making this, a certain size. But honestly, opening up the Properties tab on the right side over here makes things a lot easier. Something I want to try to do to keep things in reference is if you think of something like going down the roads of City Escape. City Escape, I've measured it out for you. It's actually 40 meters long. 40 meters long. Or wide, I guess you can say, and then it's however long you'd want your street to be. So if I want to make it 100, here's an example of a corridor in Cityscape. Now, I forget exactly if that includes the sidewalk or not, but some of these measurements are good places to start with. For now, I think I'm going to go with maybe an even 100, just to keep things simple. I think that's what I ended up doing for the tutorial anyways. And so there's my plane right there. And now I want to start adding in some objects to my level. Now, of course, to keep things nice and scaled, maybe I can, add a reference cube that'll be the same size as Sonic in our level. I do something similar to the tutorial video. To do this, you're going to make a cube that's 3 by 3 long and wide and 5 tall. And if you want to make something flush with your ground, typically what I find is you take your scale Z and you make that your location Z. So here, my scale Z was 5. I made that the location, and now my cube thing is flush to the ground. So here's Sonic right here. This is where Sonic is going to spawn, 0, 0. And yes, the coordinates do tend to be the same both in-game and in Blender. But something to notice is that Z and Y do get flipped. For Sonic Adventure 2 in-game, the Y-axis is actually going to be up and down. Meanwhile, Z in Blender is what's up and down. So, for example, if I take this Z, I push it up 10. In Blender, that shows up as 0, 0, 10. But in-game, that shows up as 0, 10, 0. Of course, Blender takes care of these things automatically when you're exporting. But for, in case you ever need to know that information, for example, in the config files, now you know. So there's Sonic right there. Let's start adding in some more objects into our level. So basically what I did for the example level is I made a cube that was 5 by 5 by 5. Pretty simple. And of course, while you're free to use G to move around stuff, I just typically find using the properties menu is a lot simpler. Of course, eventually for more creative levels, mine is very strictly geometric right now, so properties menu probably is easier. But yeah, eventually you're going to want to get into moving things. But of course, that comes with practice. So what I did, I ended up just making a 5 by 5 by 5 cube. And I pushed it 10 meters in a certain direction. I think in my case, I'm going to stick with 20. But even there, at 20, I think it's a little bit of a squeeze. So I'm going to move this 40. 40, 30, or 50 would probably be a good start. I'm going to move this 40. And I'm going to push this up so it's flush with the ground. So I take my scale Z, make that my location Z. There you go. You have a nice, simple cube. It's very small. If you'll notice, it's the same height as Sonic, so should be super easy to jump over. I believe at 10Z, Sonic will still be able to jump over this, jump on top. But at around 15, I think 15 is where he starts to struggle. I think. So I'm going to put this back to 5 over here. Simple cube. And basically what I did is I took that same cube and I copied and pasted it. So I'm doing Control C and Control V, and now you have a second cube here. And in the properties, I can just push this a little more, and we'll have 2 cubes. So my cube is 5 by 5 by 5. So if I just push this 5 meters in 10 meters in one direction, so I added 10 to 40, I got 50. Now we have 2 cubes flush with each other. Now, something interesting to note is you'll see there's a little seam here where there doesn't really need to be. So you could do some Blender magic to put those 2 cubes together if you wanted things to be cleaner or to avoid like render errors. But again, totally optional. So basically, I just copy and pasted it, and then I made it a little bigger. So maybe instead of 5 by 5, I did 10 by 10, making it scale with the ground. And I noticed that these 2 things are colliding over here, so I'll just push my X location a little more. So maybe not 60, maybe 55 it has to be. 55. 55 is looking good. Okay, perfect. So there we have 2 cubes. Nice. And, you know, I basically did the same thing for the 3rd cube, so we don't really need to go over that. But now we can go over the ramp. So in order to do the ramp, again, you can make a new cube, or you can just copy paste an existing cube. You know, you do it simpler. I find copy and pasting easier, but you can always go into the menu, add cube. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to take this location X, I'm just making negative. And that'll completely mirror it across from Sonic. So now we're going to have something on this side. And in order to make a ramp, I'm sure there's probably multiple ways of doing this in Blender, but what I found to be the easiest is you use what's known as the bisect modifier. Basically, it'll take 2 objects and subtract 1 object from the other. So once you have a place where you want your ramp to be, so I chose here to the left, I'm going to take this cube, I'm going to copy and paste it. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on one of these y-axis right here, just to keep things locked. I'm going to scroll over with the mouse wheel and, you know, hit the shift key and hold the mouse wheel button to start, you know, moving my camera around. And what I'm going to do now, I have 2 cubes in the same spot, you'll notice here. I'm going to rotate 1 cube, maybe like 45 degrees or so. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but, you know, you have this view and you can play around with it. And again, you'll always have this properties pane to change things around if you'd like. So you'll see right now it's at like 43 degrees. If I wanted to, I can make it an even 45. I'll just change those to 0. And now, something nice about being locked to one axis is when you use the G key to transform, it'll be locked into that axis. So something interesting is if you do the G key, if you're looking at like a regular angle, it'll be moving in all 3 directions, which can be for better or for worse, but it can make lining things up very difficult. So keeping something locked up to one axis really helps out. But what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take a copy of this cube, I'm going to scale it up, and then I'm going to line it up so that I'm going to have this overlap that creates a ramp that I want. And so something big here that you're looking for is the side line right here. It's going to intersect with a top portion of this cube. So there's nothing poking out of the top here, okay? And same over here. There's nothing poking out on the right over here. So when I subtract this big cube from this little cube, only that small sliver right there will be left alone. So you can do it like that. You can stay with this. I typically like ramps with a little less of a strong angle. So maybe what I'm going to do, I'm going to rotate this a little more. And I'm just going to update this a little bit. Again, nothing exact. You know, it reads 32, but, you know, it doesn't really matter. So once you have your cube in place and you've got this shape that you like, click the cube that you would like to turn into a ramp, go into this blue wrench over here, go to Add Modifier, and then choose Boolean over here. And this will open up this menu right here where you can perform some operations between objects. And what we're looking for is difference. I'm going to subtract one object from another. So you notice I have the small cube selected. I'm going to select this big cube over here. Remember the number. So that's cube 004. And down here in this object pane, I'm going to choose cube 004. And you'll notice it'll give you a little preview of what our object looks like. And it's going to give us this triangle, a ramp. So that's great. So now what I'm going to do is once I say, hey, that's good. If it's not good, I'll adjust it. But once it's good, I'm going to go to this arrow over here. I'm going to hit apply. And once you hit apply, that's it. Your object will now be cut. So we don't need this big box anymore. And now we have our ramp right here. And so you'll notice our level is now looking exactly like that example level does in the tutorial. Now, of course, I didn't come here just to show you how to do that. I'm also going to show you some more tips and tricks on how we can do certain things, including, but not limited to, how to make maybe a little loop, or how to make some curved sections, or even introduce hills into our level if we wanted to. So, first things first is with curves. Now, for curves, we're going to be following the same exact principle for making a ramp, and that is cutting one object out of another. So you'll see here, I used a cube, and cubes, they're pretty flat. So when I cut these two cubes together, you'll notice that I got a flat edge. Well, the same thing applies for if I were to use a cylinder. Now, cylinders are a little different in the way that they are round. Now, first things first, I have to get this rotated just right. So I'm going to go over here, go into the properties pane. I'm going to choose 90 degrees in a certain direction, see if it works. So not Y. I think I want it, yeah, X right there. Perfect. So now I have the roundness facing us. I'm going to lock to Y, and I'm going to hover this over our cube, and I'm just going to scale this up. And when it comes to making curved ramps, keep a note, depending on the shape, it might be a little difficult to work with the collision. Again, there is a trick that we use to fix that, and that is separating. I show that in the tutorial. But again, with certain curves, sometimes separating may not work as well. But separating should work decently. So something big here to note is if I'm cutting out something round, like a cylinder, out of this cube, we're going to have to look for certain different things. One thing is for this sphere, I'm going to have to make one side bigger than another. I can't just take a perfectly round sphere and make this work. So I'm going to hit S. I'm going to hit, I believe, Y. No, not Y. I'm going to hit S and then X. Yeah, SX. This will make this longer, although I think I may want it to be taller like this. Yeah. So now we got it a little taller. And what I'm looking for is something similar where we have nothing being cut off over here. So this is like a perfect end right here. There's no loose ends over here. And what I want is for it to be perfectly flush with this bottom part over here. But notice there's something still here, so I'm going to have to increase the size of my sphere just a little bit. So maybe not Z, but maybe in the other way. So Y, no, not Y, X like this. Perfect. And then I'm going to place this in a good spot. And you'll notice here, we have something similar where now we have 2 points right here that we're looking for, no loose ends. And if I were to cut this, it would work just fine. Again, you can kind of alter this and alter the shape of the sphere based on exactly what you want. But for right now, I'm thinking this is pretty fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to cut using the exact same method from before. I'm going to choose my cube, choose the cylinder, hit apply, and you'll notice we now have a rounded ramp. Now, of course, there's a little bit of cutoff. I forgot. Of course there is. But, if you ever notice that, super easy to fix. But yeah, that's how you make curved ramps. But now let's talk about how to do something even cooler. What about a loop? Or what about, kind of like one of those classic Sonic loops where, you go in, there's like a hole in the middle. You can do a couple loop-de-loops, little fun thing. Well, guess what? It's the same exact principle as making the ramps. It's just where you place the cylinder is a little different. So here I'm going to select my cylinder, go into the properties pane, and this time I'm actually going to make it perfectly round. So I'm going to choose just 888 for now, keep things perfect, and then I'm going to scale it smaller. And I'm basically just going to be punching out a hole out of this cube right here. Now, something that you may want is you're probably going to want the cylinder to cut off a little bit of this bottom here. So Sonic has a pathway to walk through so he can engage with this loop. So that's something you want to look forward to doing. And another thing is you want to make sure that there's enough space in between these sections over here so that things look right and there's not going to be any collision issues. Because I believe if you're too close to the wall like this over here, we might have some collision problems there. But otherwise, it's the same exact principles. You just want to cut out a hole. And I see here the sphere might be a little small, so I'm going to make this a little bigger in the S, and I believe it's Y direction. Yeah. Just to make sure that hole gets really punched in. And now I'm going to do the same exact thing. So I'm going to take the blue wrench. It's already loaded up. That's awesome. And I'm going to choose cylinder over here. Hit apply. Delete the cylinder. And there you go. Now, of course, in its current form, this is way too small for Sonic to fit into. Like, here's Sonic right over here. If Sonic were to fit into there, well, he can't. So you could preemptively make the cube bigger, or you can do what I did and work it with a small cube, and you can just scale it up from there. Both ways work. Although I think if you do it the way I did just now, maybe the polygon count might be a little smaller. I could be wrong. But, I mean, hey, it works. It's there. It's a loop-de-loop. So, awesome. We're not out of clear just yet, though. We're going to have to make this work in the game, because right now in its current form, if we had Sonic over here, Sonic's like, I'm going to use this loop. He's going to go right through some of these curves over here. And that's not what we want. We don't want him to be stuck in the loop-de-loop. But rather, we want him to enjoy the fun. We want him to, woohoo, go on top, have a good old time, So in order to do that, we are going to have to use the separate method. So in order to do that, we're going to go into edit mode so we can select vertices here. And what we want to do is we want to select all the inside faces. So you can do as I do and click and drop. Or there's different ways of selecting things. You can click over here to the face mode, and you can just select faces here on your own. I wonder if you can click and drop those. Yeah, you can, but it's less precise than just selecting the points. So I'm gonna go back to points mode, click and drag all these points. So we got all the internal sides, and there we go. That should be everything. Although I don't know why that one thing is a little lighter. It should be fine. I'm gonna go hit P on my keyboard, and I'm gonna hit by selection. And now we have two parts: the outside of the loop and the inside of the loop. And that should be all you need. So perfect. That's how you make loop-de-loops. Now, something interesting that you could do, and let's see if I have this stuff available, is when you're texturing, there's some cool things you can do with the textures to get your stuff working well. So I'm going to go over here to Material Quick Edit, and I'm also going to import some textures just like how I did before. So texture list info, import S8 text file, and I'm going to go over to textures over here. And that should import some of my textures. And let's choose something interesting, shall we? Let's choose textures. I think the cement works good too. Oh, I like this one. This one's a nice one. S-City 128.9. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to select that one. S-City 128, I think it was 9 I said, right? Yeah, 9. So 9. See, I might have to scroll. Yeah, there we are. That's going to be number 51. So I'm going to choose both these objects. I'm going to set Material Quick Edit. And something you can do too, you can just select this Land Entry Quick Edit right away. I think it makes things simpler to set textures and collision at the same time. A little life hack right there. But I'm going to set the texture ID to 51. I'm going to hit set, update. I'm also going to enable textures over here. And something cool you can do with curved things is there is this special function in the edit mode where if you select all vertices by hitting A on the keyboard and go into UV, there's this smart UV project mode. And what it'll do is it'll automatically project your texture in a way that works with the shape of your object. So you'll see here the before and after. Our texture got more, acclimated to the curve rather than before when it was just all stretched out. And this is really good for when you're working with hills or stuff with curves. And again, once you create this smart UV project, you can go into the UV editing and change things up yourself too. And so if I wanted to, just like in the tutorial, I can expand the boxes over here. That way the textures get more detailed. So you'll see here, everything follows the curve perfectly. And, because of that projection and the UV mapping I just did, the textures are now a little more detailed. I'm going to do the same with some of these points over here, if I can. A little bigger right there. And then I'm going to go over here, and we'll see the texture looks a little nicer. So there we go. I'm not going to import this level into the game. This is just a simple tutorial of how to do stuff in Blender. But one of the last things I want to show you guys how to do is how to make hills. So hills, they're a little more interesting. Lots of things that you can do in Blender that'll be super interesting in game, and hills are one of those things. And to start, you're going to want to adjust your plane, and what you're going to want to do is subdivide it. Now there's a few different ways you can do this. You can just hit subdivide over and over and over again. I think this amount is good. You don't want to go too far because the game can only handle a certain amount of triangles, but something like this is good. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to sculpt mode. And once you're in sculpt mode, I believe you have to have all the vertexes selected, so it's a good thing I have all those selected. Once you're in sculpt mode, you can choose, I believe, draw, and now you'll notice you're actually expanding some of these things up and down. So if I go, I believe one of these tabs, yeah, here we go, this top tab right here, you can change how the draw tool works. If I increase the strength and I start going over and I start drawing a little bit over here and maybe over here, come on, let's go, let's have some more over here. Yeah, there you go. You'll notice that we have some very crude hills. We have some very crude hills, but hills nonetheless over here. Now it's important that, you can make this more detailed, and I'll show you how to make it more detailed later, but some crudeness I think is better than having things more detailed, because having things more detailed will make things a little harder for the engine and a little harder for the game and for collision to work. But good. That's how you make those hills. If I wanted to, I can go back into edit mode. I could subdivide this one more further. I think we can afford it. And something else too, if I can find it, is I believe there is a triangulate mode, which instead of these squares gives us triangles, which will give us more definition to use in the hills, which is important. So let me go, I believe it's in the blue, this blue wrench over here, and it should be under maybe generate or deform. Triangulate, triangulate right here. I'm going to click that. I'm going to hit, let's see, vertices for, well, I guess it's already triangulated. Anyways, there's a way of triangulating things through this thing. Maybe you do that after you create the hill. This is still a little newer on my front here, but it's still going to be pretty cool when we get this working. But yeah, once you've subdivided, you can feel free to do whatever you want. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to draw. And my strength is all high, but you'll notice now when I make my hills, it just works. It's there. And Sonic will then be able to roll on these and, do whatever. If you wanted to, you could make lots of different structures with these things if you wanted to. And notice how I'm doing, hills that go up, but you can also do valleys too. So if I go over here and instead of direction add, I go direction subtract, you'll see things start to go lower too. So I can make some, some valleys here and there, and it's just a fun time. Uh, so there's how you do some, fun hills and stuff. Of course, as long as collision is set, this will work. But of course, if in game you're noticing some of the collisions a little weird, just go into edit mode and select some of these hills maybe, and you might want to separate those individually. But otherwise, things should just work for the most part. And again, with using that cool UV project mode that we were talking about before, we can really make these hills look pretty. So I'm trying to think. I believe that was texture 51. It should still be selected over here. So if I hit set and then I hit update, I believe that's over here. We'll see when we now have some hills over here. But if I go into edit, select all, and then UV Smart UV project, the textures will now match the hills a little more. And if I were to take this whole object over here, go into UV edit, and I were just to expand this out more, you should notice that the hills are looking a little more detailed. Of course, sometimes UV project looks better, sometimes it may not look as good, but there's lots of potential here and lots of things that you can do with this. So definitely try it out on your own. I do believe there are ways to actually use multiple textures at the same time. So maybe you can make the tops of it grass and the sides of it rock. Or maybe you can put some blue here to pretend it's a river. But otherwise, that's about all I have to show you today. So thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy making levels in Sonic Adventure 2.